Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dennis Prager Show. I want to thank Carl Jackson. He's a very, very powerful guy. He's a very good guy. And he's another one of these people you don't expect because people now think in racial and other terms, right? Not human terms. So you don't expect black, powerful conservatives. And he's one of them. And you don't expect gay conservatives. You know, I'm going to give you a list about how gays and Jews are disproportionately the public intellectuals, it's a term used, out in front for the cause of conservatism. You'll find it interesting. We'll get to that, but Carl Jackson raised the issue in my mind. So the president is impeached and then not convicted again. The whole thing rests on something that never happened. See, this is the problem. There was no insurrection. There was a riot. There was use any term, almost any term you want, but it wasn't an insurrection. People don't take selfies sitting at a desk of the House Speaker, which, by the way, I deplored as soon as it happened. It made me sick. It makes me sick in retrospect. Mitch McConnell mentioned that, I should get it for you, I analyzed his speech and I'm going to talk about it. But Mitch McConnell mentioned that, it's just several hundred people who did it, which is correct. Right after noting that 74 million people voted for President Trump. So I did the math. I assumed 400. I used the number 400. So I divided 400 into 74 million, and I got 1 in 185,000. So it's something worth noting that the president didn't succeed in causing very many people, according to the theory, to riot. Is that fair to say? So 400 versus how many rioters on the left, never called insurrectionists. They take over government buildings, they burn them down, they create their own property like Chaz in Seattle. And did they do one in Portland too? Did they give it a name? No, it was Seattle. And that's none of those are insurrections. So the whole thing, if they had called it, and this bothered me about Mitch McConnell, he used the word insurrection. And he did fight during the Trump era for the president's agenda, and he did a great job. It's so interesting. People live without the past as a frame of reference. You get much more sober when you think about history. So the president made irresponsible statements. I mean, if he had used the language that I have used.
You're talking about irresponsible statements overall.
For example, saying, I won in a landslide.
You're not talking about.
No. The president, in conjunction with what he aroused. I have said from the beginning that there's no proof, or at least not proof that I have seen, but there is so much evidence. And had he used language like that, instead of the certitude of a steal and the word, look, he always is over the top in his language, and I always ignored it because he did such a great job as president. And I don't want people to forget that. I will give you example after example of what is being undone that he did good. Give you a little example. He had a 1776 commission. He started a government agency to explore the charge that is being made, the lie, that it is just a lie, that America was founded in 1619, not 1776. And as I repeat every day, almost every day, if your child's school teaches the 1619 lie, take your child out, or one day you will not recognize your child. I have warned you. I keep warning you. You know how problematic it is logistically to homeschool or change schools. If anybody whose child is alienated from them today because they have become a member of the cult of the left, and it is a cult, they think like cultists. And they treat parents like members of a cult do. They disown them emotionally and in terms of speech. If any of those people would have been told, had you not sent your kids to regular school, private or public, you would have had a better human being for a child. They would have wished they could turn back the clock. So I'm telling you who are already in the turn back clock with kids, if they teach the 1619 curriculum, you shouldn't have your kid there. President Trump made a commission, started a commission to deal with that issue. The first day in office, Joe Biden nixed it. This picture, this lying picture of him as a moderate, tell me something the left wants that he hasn't done yet. Or what percentage of leftist, not liberal, agenda items has he already passed? That is so indicative that he did that. President Trump did so much good for this country. It seems like the work of the devil. I've never said that because I don't believe in a devil. It's not my theology. But I have to say, I've gotten much more respect for those who believe, not all those who believe in it, I've always respected. I've gotten much more respect for the belief that there is a devil who hates America, certainly hates America of its traditional values, liberty, e pluribus unum, in God we trust. So they have once again cheapened, impeached. There's already talk that if the House becomes Republican, that they will impeach some Democrats. Believe me, they will have ample reason. I would have opposed this ferociously in the past. But because they have cheapened the word impeach, then they have to suffer by what they created. Insurrection. That's the root of the lie. Insurrection. People, unarmed people made an insurrection. Isn't that an amazing thing? New York Times reports in a brief message that it appears that Officer Sicknick was not killed with a fire extinguisher. Wasn't killed with any blunt instrument. For all we know, he died of a heart attack. And they had him lie in state. My heart goes out to him and his family. That's a given. But lie in state? Even that they cheapened. You understand? There is nothing that the left doesn't cheapen. Lie in state was reserved for the most honored Americans that we had. The only reason the officer Sicknick lay in state was in order to highlight the evil of the insurrection that never occurred. So he wasn't killed, apparently. He died, but not everybody who dies gets killed. Is that fair? Let alone murdered. So his lying in state is a lie. The insurrection is a lie. The impeachment is a lie. But it doesn't matter. Everything is to be used to further the ends of the left. God. The New York Times started the lie, by the way. They alone are responsible for the lie that the officer was killed with a fire extinguisher. Back in a moment.
America First with Sebastian Gorka.
But who cares? 33, 28, died in a hospital, died in a nursing home. They died.
Who cares? They died. Remind you of anyone? Benghazi, Hillary. What difference does it make? It makes a difference. From the New York Post headline, Cuomo aide Melissa DeRosa admits they hid nursing home data so feds wouldn't find out. Let's ask somebody who's definitely got an opinion. Coming from hosting his own show on Fox News. Not quite. It was only a 25-minute segment, but it was fabulous. From Congressional District Number 1 in New York. Great friend of the show, Congressman Lee Zeldin. Welcome.
It's good to be back with you, Seb.
Congrats on that great hit. I have to ask you, I'm just going to be super cynical for a second. This is a guy who was given what? He was given an Emmy as governor for his use of TV briefings in his handling of the coronavirus. Now we find out they hid the stats of the deaths from the feds so they wouldn't get in trouble. Is Governor Cuomo ever going to face any consequences?
An Emmy, and he wrote a self-congratulatory book on leadership of his response, and he started selling this ridiculous poster. I don't know if you remember this story, but if you haven't seen it, it was absurd. Several months ago, praising himself and the response, and that when he says "who cares," what you think about are the lives impacted, the families, the people who lost their mom or dad, grandmother or grandfather.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Liberal Justice Louis Brandeis said that states are laboratories of democracy, that we will be able to tell what states are succeeding and failing. Remember, what makes the American Republican system different, small r, not Republican Party, but a system based in a constitutional republic, is that the states created the federal government. The federal government did not create the states. That distinction is so incredibly important. We're a coalition of states. We're a coalition of sovereign entities that voluntarily agreed to a national compact. That is why those of us that are conservatives don't like the heavy hand of the federal government. We say, why does the Department of Education exist? Why do you need a Department of Labor when you have a Georgia Department of Labor? The federal government should be there for federal crimes, military, when needed, a social safety net, but really that should be left to the states. Interstate commerce, protecting federal parks and lands, protecting our borders, managing immigration, international diplomacy. And I'm sure there's a couple other things I can name that would probably the proper role of government, but that's about it. Most things should be left to the states for good reason. The Founding Fathers knew this.
Hello, my friends. There's another point. I'm Dennis Prager. There's another point that should be made here. The rioters did only damage to the cause of conservatism and anti-leftism. Only damage. It was a 100% negative event. There's nothing good about it. Somebody once said about it, I don't remember what it was about, but they said it was worse than bad. It was stupid. I mean, stupid isn't worse than bad, but it's a very good way of putting it. but there's nothing you can do. You can't. You sort of can't guarantee that people on your side, that a tiny minority, will hurt the majority of the good people. They went in just as Senators Cruz and Hawley were about to present evidence for election fraud. Now, two things to be said. A, it's spectacularly destructive what they did. 100%. It's pure, raw emotion. And the emotions cannot guide one's behavior. Ever. Except with regard to what you will have for dinner. If you feel that you want Italian and not Chinese, then go Italian. That's when your emotions should guide you. Otherwise, I can't think of any time that they should. They are great. They make you human. But as a guide, do not follow your heart and your eyes, after which ye go astray. Book that is no longer taught, and that is the root of the crisis in the West. It is the book that is no longer taught. So they go into the Capitol just as our side, with two of its most courageous members, Cruz and Hawley, are about to speak and present evidence for the dishonesty that many of us believe may well have taken place. You see, if people say there's no proof, I agree with them. I don't know of proof. There's very little in life that is provable. This is not right now a court, but there can be very suggestive evidence, and people who are intellectually honest should hear it, and then say, "Yeah, that doesn't make you a conspiracy theorist, doesn't make you a fool to acknowledge that a lot seems to have been awry in this election." By the way, could have been a lot awry, and Joe Biden still have won. There are a lot of possibilities. But the rioters made it impossible to present the case in the Senate. So it might be as well another argument for, would President Trump have wanted to disrupt the one chance he had to have his case aired in the U.S. Senate? These people undoubtedly planned to do it before the rally. It wasn't the president's words, "go peacefully," that prompted them to do it, if people are honest. The whole thing was dishonest. Oh, he uses the word fight. Then the defense had a video of every Democrat that is recognizable using the term fight. Joe Biden said he would take Donald Trump, what is it, behind
the gym.
A gym and punch him. Can you imagine if Donald Trump had said, "I'm going to take Joe Biden behind a gym and punch him"? He'd be impeached. So just remember that the world of the lie in which we live, like Sicknick, poor officer who died. One of the big lies might well be, I don't know. We'll see what happens in court. Might well be that the Minneapolis police officer murdered George Floyd. It's written on every left-wing source, from the New York Times to CNN, killed or murdered by a white policeman. How do they know that? Given that a recalcitrant suspect is kept down by the Minneapolis police force exactly that way, with a knee on the side of the neck, and we don't know of anybody dying from it. Maybe he didn't die from a knee on the side of the neck. He was yelling, "I can't breathe," when they were trying to get him into the police car. Did you ever watch the video? Do you not think everyone is morally obligated to watch the entire video of the interaction between the police and George Floyd, how polite they were to him, almost begging him to get into the police car, and he wouldn't. He was a big and strong man. It's not easy to get him in. So what they did was they held him. Now, I fully acknowledge that on the other side, people kept saying, look, he can't breathe to the officer. But the officer probably hears that a great deal. He had already heard this from George Floyd before anything happened. And then coroner notes that he had 2 or 3 times a lethal dose of fentanyl. The mainstream media lie because the truth is not a left-wing value. Where did the New York Times get the lie that the officer was killed by a demonstrator with a fire extinguisher? They never told us. They said two people affiliated with the police department or something. And more investigation, including, who's the great one at American Greatness? Julie Kelly. I had on last week. It turns out they may not even policemen. It may well be Democrats who made it up. Now, the thought that a Democrat would make up a lie is so difficult for us to imagine that one does wonder where the lie originated. Killed with a fire extinguisher. Did they ever find the fire extinguisher that was used? I'm just curious. 1-8-Prager 776. Do you know how much of Texas and other places people don't have heat in their homes because they're not called windmills. What are they called again? The wind turbines are frozen stiff. Snow on them. They can't function.
Neither can solar panels.
Or the solar panels are covered with snow. United States of America, land awash in natural gas and oil. Texas, people are freezing to death.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Mike, what is the number one reason you think people in the state want him recalled? Is it his handling of the COVID-19 crisis? Is it the way he's been ordering, things like oil and gas leases and pushing a left-wing agenda? That can't be it, because this is a left-wing state. So people must be ticked off about his handling of the COVID-19. And Mike, if that's the case, then what happens when the vaccines kick in, and what happens when Governor Newsom begins to back down, as he's already begun to back down?
California has 5 million Republicans, 9 million Democrats, but our biggest problem we have out here is there's 6.5 million NPPs, people that just aren't paying attention. They actually tend to be conservative, and the one thing that's uniting the state, believe it or not, on the right and the left, is actually Gavin himself. The number one reason, if you were to boil into 2 buckets, is everything you said, but the reality is he's a bad leader making poor decisions, and COVID just amplified. We started this before COVID really hit the scene, if you will. This has just amplified the cycle, and things like dining at the French Laundry. You think that's not a bad decision? The EDD, oops, we handed out $30 billion of money we shouldn't have. You think that's bad management? Schools not reopening. The list and reasons to recall Gavin, we have about 64 on our website, and we still couldn't fill it up, but recallgavin2020.com is long and endless. The reality is California has a bad governor making bad decisions, sending us in a bad direction for those of us that live out here. Our state's on fire, our power goes out, our taxes are too high.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
The 1918 virus iterated.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here with you, and we got Dan in Minneapolis. Hello, Dan.
Dennis.
Yes.
Yes, we have the same birthday. Oh, anyway.
Happy birthday.
The same day, but the same day.
I know that.
Anyway.
Yeah, August 2nd.
Yeah.
I'm wishing
anyway,
you belated happy birthday.
I am, are you there?
I am.
Okay. I'm really disappointed in you. I mean, you have a lot of wisdom, but every time you talk about the George Floyd case, it's just like, I'm just amazed at your lack of empathy and your dishonesty. You talk about like it was a regular police move, that the police officer had his knee on his neck for like 8 or 9 minutes. It was just evil. It was murder. And the way you
how do you know that? How do you know that?
I saw the video.
I saw the video too. How do you know that he didn't die of another cause? Given that police do that all the time in Minneapolis.
Police don't do that all the time.
You
don't have you don't have your knee on the neck of somebody for 9 minutes.
All right, so one of us is wrong. Okay, I've read over and over that it was part of Minneapolis Police Department procedure. It has since been abandoned. That if you have a guy who won't get into the police car and keeps resisting arrest, that if you have to, that is a way to keep him immobilized without endangering his life. So one of us is wrong on that. I didn't say that he wasn't killed. I said I don't know if he was killed because of the ubiquity of the use of that procedure, and because fentanyl 3 times or 2 times a lethal dose was found in him, and because he couldn't breathe as soon as they met him, and they were very kind to him for like 15 minutes. Yes, kind. You didn't see the whole video? You're speaking from ignorance. I did.
You are speaking from a complete lack of empathy and looking at the facts.
Okay, empathy is not the issue. The issue is truth.
Yes, truth.
Did you see the video of the police trying to get him? Did you see the video of the police trying to get him into a police car?
Yes, but he had his neck.
Wait, no. You didn't see it then. It has nothing to do with his neck. No. You're not. Of course, I'll let you finish. I just want you to answer my question. I don't believe that you saw the whole video.
That's probably true.
Okay, so we're talking. Okay, so listen. God bless you. God bless your birthday. this is a great example of people differ because they have a perception of facts that are different. I had access to more facts than Dan. I thought that Officer Chauvin killed him. I have no reason to argue otherwise. 35 years of broadcasting and not one lie in 35 years is a pretty damn good record. Almost no inaccuracies, at least none that go on for as long as a New York Times inaccuracy. I'm committed to the truth more than any other single thing, more than conservatism. How could people come and oh, it's so interesting. I have no empathy. My first empathy in these cases is for the truth. The truth shall set you free is one of the great lines of the New Testament. By the way, that is the only thing that sets us free is truth. That's the reason the left suppresses it so much. Because they have no value in freedom either. George Floyd was a troubled soul. He didn't deserve to die. Okay, let me make that clear. That's not my argument. I'm simply arguing, and I fear what's going to happen. I said this with Michael Brown. The more I learned about the Michael Brown issue in Ferguson, the more it was clear that the officer was morally and legally right in using lethal force on Michael Brown. Yet to this day, people go, hands up, don't shoot, which he never said. That was a lie, too. And Barack Obama participated in the lie by regularly, or not regularly, but by repeatedly using the term Ferguson as an example of police brutality and racism. It's a lie that Ferguson is an example of police racism. It's just a lie. It's so easy to go with the herd, my friends. It's so easy. You know how much easier it would be for me to say, oh, look, he was killed by the police. I could easily say, look, he's killed by the police, but not all police are racist, and it's totally wrong to imply that. Right? Then everybody would be happy. I don't speak to make listeners happy. Never did. I speak to tell you the truth as I see it. Watch the video. They were kind and respectful to George Floyd for about 15 minutes, trying to get him into a police car. And now, ladies and gentlemen, relief factor. It's sort of a miracle pill. That's how I think of it. The speed with which it works, and it's over-the-counter safe, is astonishing. That's why they say to you, you try it for 3 weeks, and if it doesn't work in 3 weeks, it doesn't work because it does work so fast. So why wouldn't you try it for 3 weeks? Neck pain, shoulder pain, leg pain, etc., knee pain. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-500-8384, 800-500-8384, $19.95 for 3 weeks, relieffactor.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm engaging in whataboutism. Here I am bringing up an example to show my point. I can't do that. It shows you hypocrisy. Selective outrage. Hillary Clinton can parade around for 4 years and call the election illegitimate and say it was stolen. And nobody say, hey, excuse me, you're giving energy to Donald Trump down the road to say the same thing, so maybe you ought to back. Nobody said anything. You know why? Because they believed it was stolen. 78% of Democrats believe that the Russians interfered, which everybody knows they did and has acknowledged, but that they changed the outcome of the election. And Jay Johnson, the then head of the Homeland Security Department under Obama, testified there's no evidence whatsoever We haven't reached any kind of conclusion that the outcome was changed. We know that no voting tallies were changed. They tried, but they failed. Yet 78% of Democrats, and they get their news from CNN, their feed from Facebook, New York Times, and 78% of Democrats have convinced themselves that but for whatever Russia did, Donald Trump would not be president, even though the intel community has never reached that conclusion. Am I not supposed to bring that up? It says something about your reason and your logic. I said that yesterday about the O.J. Simpson case. How do you respect a bunch of people who look at the same evidence of overwhelming guilt and say the man was innocent man who was framed? How do you respect somebody like that? How do you respect their judgment, their mentality, their ability to reason? Same thing over here.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
I was a Cuban American, and the problem with the Cuban Americans is that we are the only ethnic group that you can make fun of and pay no consequence. The Cuban Americans in the United States could be made fun of, mocked, but no one will ever pay a price. Whether you are academia, whether you're the intelligentsia, whether you're in the news media, it doesn't matter. Why? Because we sided with the United States in the very big fight with the big Satan that was loved and adored for 60 years by the rest of the world. That's
I've never heard that before. I've often cited to my friends on the left Armando Valladares Against All Hope as the Bible they've got to read to have even a glimpse. If they're an Anglo like me and they're Irish Catholic, they need to read that book. But I have never heard what you just said. I didn't realize that that is something you believe. I've heard it said that anti-Catholicism is the last acceptable prejudice, which I believe. I'm a Catholic. But you just...
I'd like to remind you, my dear friends, of Pure Talk. The price is so inexpensive for phone service, for smartphone service, that I was suspicious. So I actually got a phone and signed up, and it's basically the same thing as I have with the regular company. $30 a month, 6 gigabytes of data, unlimited talk, unlimited text. And you get half off the first month if you use the promo code Prager. I want to check on that. I think it's sometimes it's Dennis, sometimes it's Prager. I wish it was consistent, but I want you to get your discount.
One of the two will work.
And it's actually, you don't have to. You just do pound 250 and say Dennis Prager. There you go. Dial pound 250 on your phone. That's all you have to do. Say Dennis Prager. Get all the info you want. Again, 6 gigabytes of data, unlimited talk, unlimited text. You go over the data. They don't charge you for it. Pound 250 and say Dennis Prager. Yep. Harold in Los Angeles. Dennis Prager, hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Better than my country, as I often say.
Well, I mirror your thoughts all the time. I have to say that the restraint that he used is considered less lethal, and that they practice that restraint in the academy. They've done it thousands of times without incidents. And the facts are is that they went to that restraint to avoid shootings and lethal contact with citizens. I work for the LA County Sheriff's Department. I'm retired. And I remember talking to the grand jury, and they said, well, isn't this true that this is a lethal hold? No, it's less lethal. And we use it thousands of times. Oh, no, you can't. This is lethal. And I said, we teach people in the academy. We practice on each other. That's how we learn how to do it correctly. So don't tell me that this is lethal. we've saved so many lives by controlling somebody with less lethal force than lethal force, which is a firearm. And it's just as simple as that.
Well, that's a very important call. Thank you. If you just Google, what did I Google? Minneapolis Police Department knee on neck policy. So here's from Insider.com, the lead thing on Google. Police in Minneapolis are still allowed to kneel on a suspect's neck under the department's use of force policy, but it can only be used by officers who have been trained on how to do so without putting direct pressure on the airway. That was from after the George Floyd death. So, MPD, this is from July 6th last year. MPD training materials show knee-to-neck restraint. Next one, USA Today, a left-wing source. George Floyd death, neck restraint allowed in Minneapolis. Experts say knee-to-neck restraint is dangerous, but Minneapolis allows it. By the way, as soon as I see experts say, I assume it's not true. I'm not saying it isn't true. I'm just telling you my assumption. I would like to know who the experts are. How many do experts ever differ with experts? Notice you only hear experts that USA Today agrees with, or the New York Times. Experts say. But anyway, that was the procedure of the Minneapolis Police Department. And what's going to happen is the jury will hear and see the evidence. He'll be acquitted of murder. And there will be horrific riots around the country. Horrific. Innocent people will die. People will lose their businesses. And very little will be done to prosecute these people because they're Democratic voters, overwhelmingly. And you talk about incite. The media has incited so much violence in my lifetime that they will, if there is a heaven and a hell, I worry about the hereafter for the media. How much violence they've incited with the racist lies that they tell. Everything is racism. Everything is racism. The damage that they have done to race relations on the left is like the damage they've done to colleges and high schools and elementary schools and sports and so on. It's, as I say, a tsunami of chaos that comes from the left. This country is so profoundly non-racist. There are racists within it. I always use the example of anti-Semitism. It has been the best country Jews have lived in outside of Israel in the last 2,000 years, and more than 2,000 years, since Cyrus and Persia. It's a long time ago. But there are anti-Semites in America. Some famous ones like Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford. Father Coughlin. They existed. And it's still a blessing to be a Jew here, and it's a blessing to be a black here. The problem with freedom is it's a big one. In freedom, it's hard to blame society for your failure. I have an article here to give you an idea of the destruction of the left of everything. I have so many printouts, and I'll tell you why in a moment, giving you an update on my life. But first, I need the article on math. This is the insult to blacks that the racist left, which is redundant, engages in. They are changing math standards for minorities.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Mike, what is the number one reason you think people in the state want him recalled? Is it his handling of the COVID-19 crisis? Is it the way he's been ordering, things like oil and gas leases and pushing a left-wing agenda? That can't be it, because this is a left-wing state. So people must be ticked off about his handling of the COVID-19. And Mike, if that's the case, then what happens when the vaccines kick in, and what happens when Governor Newsom begins to back down, as he's already begun to back down?
California has 5 million Republicans, 9 million Democrats, but our biggest problem we have out here is there's 6.5 million NPPs, people that just aren't paying attention. They actually tend to be conservative, and the one thing that's uniting the state, believe it or not, on the right and the left, is actually Gavin himself. The number one reason, if you were to boil into 2 buckets, is everything you said, but the reality is he's a bad leader making poor decisions, and COVID just amplified. We started this before COVID really hit the scene, if you will. This has just amplified the cycle, and things like dining at the French Laundry.
All right, everybody, Dennis Prager here. Well, I do want to add, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I should mention it one more time. What is a puzzle to me with regard to the George Floyd death is, and it's a puzzle, I don't use the word as a euphemism for I don't agree or I do agree. I would like to find out why the officer did not lift his leg once he stopped crying out and apparently was fading, and people on the side, he's saying he's dying. I would like to know why he continued. So let me make it clear, the following are the outstanding stories on that issue. Was any of this animated by racism? Number one. Number two, was he murdered or killed? Is the procedure used normally and people almost never die from it, which is what I just read to you from a number of sources for the Minneapolis Police Department. And there are other police departments that did ban it. If you care about truth, which no rioters do, then none of this matters. There is a joy in rioting when your life is largely empty. how many people do you think? How many of the rioters do you think are married with children? What percentage? I think it's about, in the country, I think the number of people married with children is about 50%, which is low. But if that's true, it may be more. Maybe at one time it would be 75%. But in any event, it's a very large number. Do you think 50% of the rioters are married with children? I don't. These are people with unfulfilled lives who love destruction. I'm talking about the rioters. I have other thoughts on the protesters, but they are of a different category morally than the rioters. And the rioters knew that if there was a Democrat in office as mayor or governor, they could riot all they like. So my view is it's possible that we will see increased rioting if the verdict in Minneapolis does not go the way the left wants it to go. All right, we continue. I'm Dennis Prager.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So we have an admission of culpability. We have 14,000 dead in the homes. Where do New Yorkers go next who lost a husband, a wife? What's the next step, Congressman?
I would say a few things. One is you have law enforcement, you have prosecutors at other levels of government that could take actions, the first thing. Right. Secondly, the New York Republican congressional delegations, and our numbers are increasing. Claudia Tenney won her, was finally certified the winner of her race and was sworn in this past week. 8 of us today sent a letter to the Department of Justice with regards to this obstruction of justice case that's emerging, calling on the Department of Justice to investigate this charge. Now, you have a confirmation hearing that's coming up. Merrick Garland, the nominee to be the next Attorney General. Right. Inside of that confirmation hearing is a great opportunity for senators to maybe ask about this letter, or put aside my letter that was sent with my colleagues today, just asking about the underlying issue, and you can't allow, with all these different confirmation hearings, the person who's answering your question to just not give you any answer on any of this. We need to get assurances that something like this is going to be pursued. Don't do it for me. Don't do it for a member of Congress. You're doing it for those thousands of families.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
One of the things I wanted to go through is how the Democrats tampered with evidence. And I was going through it with our team. I said, you do know that Eric Swalwell, who's a lover of Fang Fang, the Chinese Communist Party spy, he tampered with evidence. And David Schoen, to his great credit, came out and proved that point, that Eric Swalwell, and this is why this is not a trial. This is a Hollywood Broadway production. That's all this is. So in a real trial, you'd say, Your Honor, this evidence is tampered with. So you had Swalwell, the lover of Fang Fang, who came out and said that Donald Trump called for the cavalry to come. Cavalry. Now, anyone in the Christian world knows that there's a difference between Calvary and Calvary. I sometimes, without unintentionally, mispronounce one or the other, but I know the difference. Calvary, C-A-L, cavalry. One is where Christ was crucified. The other is horse-mounted military. So Eric Swalwell reads Jennifer Lawrence's tweet, who says, Mr. President, the cavalry is coming. So Eric Swalwell then comes out and says, well, on the House impeachment floor, you see here, President Trump, he was calling in for reinforcements, and the cavalry is coming. Now, to an untrained eye, you're like, well, there might be something, maybe there might be. It's nothing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Mike, what is the number one reason you think people in the state want him recalled? Is it his handling of the COVID-19 crisis? Is it the way he's been ordering, things like oil and gas leases and pushing a left-wing agenda? That can't be it, because this is a left-wing state. So people must be ticked off about his handling of the COVID-19. And Mike, if that's the case, then what happens when the vaccines kick in, and what happens when Governor Newsom begins to back down, as he's already begun to back down?
California has 5 million Republicans, 9 million Democrats, but our biggest problem we have out here is there's 6.5 million NPPs, people that just aren't paying attention. They actually tend to be conservative, and the one thing that's uniting the state, believe it or not, on the right and the left, is actually Gavin himself. The number one reason, if you were to boil into 2 buckets, is everything you said, but the reality is he's a bad leader making poor decisions, and COVID just amplified. We started this before COVID really hit the scene, if you will. This has just amplified the cycle, and things like dining at the French Laundry. You think that's not a bad decision?
I print out a copy of things I want to bring to your attention on a daily basis. Having finally finished Deuteronomy, my commentary, my 3rd volume of my commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, which a laborious effort that I will not labor you with. So what I did was I had this giant stack of papers that piled up in the course of the last month or two because of the intensity of the writing and the editing and the editing and the editing and the editing. And here's a gem for you. Now, let's see here. I obviously put the wrong date on. How do you like that? Look at the date I put, March 13th, 2021. Find the right date. I'm very curious. Fox News, Oregon promotes teacher program. Listen to this. The Oregon Department of Education, it might well be from last year, but it doesn't matter. They're doing it now. The Oregon Department of Education recently encouraged teachers to register for training that encourages, quote, ethno-mathematics. You hear that? And argues, among other things, that white supremacy manifests itself, they capitalize white at Fox. They figure if they're going to capitalize black, they should capitalize white. Sick world we live in. That white supremacy manifests itself in the focus. Are you ready? This is a very important part of the left. White supremacy manifests itself in the focus on finding the right answer. Finding the right answer is considered a form of racism. An ODE newsletter, that's Oregon Department of Education, sent last week advertises a February 21st Pathway to Math Equity microcourse. Now, what does it mean, math equity? And please understand what is the difference between equality and equity. Equity is equality of result. Equality is equality of opportunity and, of most important, equality before the law. Again, a Pathway to Math Equity microcourse. How do we get everybody to have the same grade in math? It is designed for middle school teachers to make use of a toolkit for, quote, dismantling racism in mathematics. Did you hear that? This proves my point that I have made for the last few years. There's so little racism in America that they have to manufacture it. This is proof. The proof, anyone who says math is racist is doing so because there's so little real racism, they have to invent it. How can math be racist? How can 8 squared is 64 be racist?
The story's from February 12th.
It's from February 12th? So okay, so I got it. I post-dated it for some reason to March. Thank you. So it's really, all right, February 13th. I don't know why I would have gotten that wrong. Anyway, the event website identifies the event as a partnership between California's San Mateo County office. Doesn't Nancy Pelosi come from San Mateo County? Take a look. I may be wrong. Of education, the Education Trust West, and others. Part of the toolkit includes a list of ways, quote, white supremacy culture infiltrates math classrooms. Now, are you ready for examples of white supremacy culture? They include, quote, the focus on getting the right answer. Right is put in quotes. Students being required to show their work and other alleged manifestations. Quote, this is the document for the Equitable Math Toolkit. Quote, the concept of mathematics being purely objective is unequivocally false, and teaching it is even much less so. What does that mean? Teaching it is much less so. All right. Upholding the idea that there are always right and wrong answers. Perpetuate objectivity, should be perpetuates. As well as fear of open conflict. That's right. I told you truth is not a left-wing value. Is this not a perfect example? There is no right answer. It's true for history. It is true for anthropology, sociology, now math. There is no right answer because the only right answer is what furthers the left's cause. In this case, equity. If not all students are getting the math answers correct, then you have to deny that there is a correct answer. ODE Communications Director Mark Siegel defended the, quote, equitable math education program, saying it helps educators learn key tools for engagement, develop strategies to improve equitable outcomes. Get it? Equitable outcomes for Black, capitalized, Latinx. Why do they not say Latinos? Isn't that amazing? How the manipulation and distortion of language is no word Latinx. You think Spanish-speaking people ever refer, when they speak about Latin Americans, they say Latinx? The person will say, why, you about to sneeze? Might have mistaken the statement for a Kleenex. There's no word Latinx, but it's now used regularly. Does the New York Times use it in regular reporting? Or does it say Latinos? I'm very curious. Upholding that the idea, equitable outcomes for Black, Latinx, and multilingual students and join communities of practice. I don't know what that means. An associated dismantling racism workbook linked with the toolkit similarly identifies objectivity, described as, quote, the belief that there is such a thing as being objective or neutral is a characteristic of white supremacy. Instead of focusing on one right answer, the toolkit encourages teachers, quote, to come up with at least two answers that might solve this problem. This is math, my friends, math. The discipline more than any other that we can study that has right and wrong answers. It's one of its beauties. The framework for deconstructing racism in mathematics offers essential characteristics of anti-racist math educators and critical approaches to dismantling white supremacy in math classrooms by visualizing the toxic characteristics of white supremacy values. The toolkit reads, before linking to both the workbook and a paper on white supremacy culture. Still think you should send your kids to a regular school, especially in a place like Oregon? There are no right answers in math because minority students are not getting the answers correctly. If you cared about minority students, you would work harder to educate them on how to find the right answer. You would not deny that there is a right answer. Is that fair to say? I think it is. 1-8-PRAGER 776-877-243-7776. The state with the most oil sees people freezing to death. Texas. Why?
State of alarm and playing